At age 16, I worked in my parents' garage, cleaning violins over the summer for my dad's business. On a small workbench by a tiny TV, I watched Munsters reruns while cleaning instruments and vacuuming out dirty cases. The work was mind-numbingly boring, but it was an easy job with a short commute. I endured Dad's at-home business with customers calling at all hours of the day and the piles of instruments invading rooms of our home. I write down each instrument thinking only of the paycheck and how I might spend it at the local music shop. After college, I spent a few years in the workforce, transferring calls and doing paperwork for a large company, and suddenly the violin empire my father built seemed incredibly charming. He was gracious enough to allow me to apprentice under him, and at 24, I started working for him again. By this time, the business had grown too large for his house, and he rented a small retail space in Arlington. My first day, I noticed it doesn't look much different from the old garage. Sure, Mom wallpapered the front of the store and hung curtains, but the workspace in the back used Dad's lifelong design aesthetic. Free stuff is good enough. He built shelves from old 2x4s and used pieces of carpeting. He kept tools in old Folgers coffee cans. My ideas of a proper violin shop included 100-year-old handcrafted instruments hanging on the walls and Vivaldi music playing in the background. Instead, the shop had plywood walls and the dulcet tones of Rush Limbaugh. Dad and his business partner didn't fit the part of violin shop owners either. His partner wore a Harley-Davidson t-shirt with the sleeves cut off and a rattlesnake-tailed necklace. Dad tended to go way too long between haircuts and wore shirts until they were threadbare. Now, Dad instructed me according to his priorities. First, he directed me to the gun he kept under the workbench. Next, he explained some basic violin repairs. In the first few months, I learned how to touch up scratches and change out basic pieces of hardware like pegs and tailpieces and chin rest. His shop had insanely busy seasons. Thousands of kids each year decided they wanted to be an orchestra, and they came to the shop all at once with their parents and siblings and sometimes their dog. They all needed an instrument yesterday. And my father, with a line of families extending out the door into the August heat, took the time to joke with a quiet fifth grader waiting for a viola. And what school do you go to? Butler Elementary? I'm so sorry, you've got that mean teacher. This was one of his favorite jokes. Later that girl would figure out this man is referring to his wife. We got through the intense pressures of those Augusts, year by year, and in between each year I learned more and more about instruments. There were constant issues. Bridges needing replacement, bows needing fresh horsehair. Strings were broken or unwinding. Pegs weren't fitting. Someone's cello neck had broken clean off the instrument. Sometimes a kid would bring in an inexpensive instrument of their own, asking us to fix one broken string. I couldn't stand the half dozen other issues making that instrument nearly unplayable, and I would often make those adjustments for free. It was a habit I picked up from Dad. I preferred spending all of my time at that workbench. I invested in tools and read books on violin repair. I fell in love with tinkering with instruments and getting each one, no matter how cheap, to sing at its best. Dad had time for whoever walked in. He found a way to make anyone laugh, even the mariachi player who knew about 5 words in English. We went on like this for 7 years, the shop humming along, me quiet in the back at the workbench, him in the front taking care of customers. It was then that Dad and I reached a crossroads. Over the years, he cheered me on as I rented instruments out of my own home, and I finally signed a lease on my own shop, an hour away from his in Richardson. We always knew this day was coming, he said, sizing up my tiny office. I looked at this man with shaggy, graying hair and was surprised at how much he and I grew to love the same job. I never would have found this wonderful work without his help. This new leap meant my time at his shop would be limited. There was now only one day a week that I was able to trek over to Arlington to help out at his place, and this was our new normal for 1 year. Then, in the fall of 2010, Dad found he couldn't sign his name properly, and he got scared enough to see a doctor. The doctor ordered a brain scan, and our family learned a new word: glioblastoma. He never set foot in his shop again. Treatment was aggressive for this debilitating cancer, and we watched him endure brain surgery and radiation. He refused to know the survival statistics, while everyone around him knew he would be lucky to last a year. My mother learned expert nursing skills as he grew progressively weaker over the next 10 months. Despite the heartbreak of this, I had no choice but to work. His shop was in limbo as we did all we could, me, his business partner, and some after-school workers. I was under the gun to do a week's worth of repairs, doing short visits to his shop, as there was no one else able to do that work. There was a sense of all of us falling behind. A constant parade of customers asked us, "How's Wayne?" I tried to be kind, but their sincere questions reminded me of the man I loved and knew was dying. I was angry that in so many ways he was already gone. All I could do to help was continue working at his shop, and even that wasn't working. On a warm July night, my brother and I, perhaps on instinct, spent the night at our parents' house. The next morning, I visited Dad's shop for one small repair. I pushed a fresh plug of horsehair into a little hollow at the top of a violin bow, wetting the hair and brushing it straight before winding thread several times around the far end, joining all the hair back together. I remembered when I thought bow repairs were torturous. Now I did the work without much thought, and it felt zen-like as my hands instinctively went through the motions. My mother called, and before she spoke the words, "I know, he's gone." I stood at his workbench and felt the rough marks along the edges from countless knife nicks, noting the odd patina of varnish stains and collections of dried glue. I learned of his death where he taught me the lessons of my life's work. I don't work at his store anymore. Over a period of months, I trained another guy how to do repairs, and my mother eventually took on my dad's job. While I felt a deep sense of obligation to that place, I was relieved to let go. That last year of my father's life, while he couldn't get out much, he gave me some birthday money. Wanting me to be safe, he always told me to buy a gun for my shop. I never did. But this time I bought a necklace with a golden gun charm. It was my way of telling him that I would be protected, would continue to be protected, whether he was with me or not. The necklace was my way of showing him I would be okay. And I do feel okay. As I continue work at my shop, I hear little pieces of his advice as I work on an instrument. I feel the push of his spirit as I make a joke with a fifth grader. He nudges me as I try to speak a bit of Spanish to the parent leaning on his kid for interpretation. And I feel watched over and protected, even when I am not wearing that necklace.